scared in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding Suspendables, Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. Welcome to the weekend, folks. Glad that you're here. Glad that we are part of your weekend as you've made it through, trudging through Monday through Friday, and now you can get to all the errands that you put out all week long, mow the grass, get the groceries, stand in lines. We're grateful to be part of that with you. Maybe making your weekend a little bit better, maybe a little bit more radical today. We're doing some Saturday grab bag, but with a little bit of a twist because Garrett's not with us again. I promise he'll be back with us next week, but I am not going to be solo today. We're going to have another Suspendable with us, George Hill, friend of the American Radicals Podcast program. He's going to come on and educate us and illuminate us about Ukraine against Russia, which is still a thing. Remember a couple weeks ago when we were worried about thermonuclear war happening? And then we forgot because LA was on fire. That's still out there. George is an expert on what's going on there. He's going to get us up to speed. We're going to have a vindication discussion between him and I about Suspendables bringing information forward. And now it's been proven to be accurate, as we knew all along. We'll talk about fake fights going on with James Comey and flag burning, and then some real corruption over at the Department of Defense and the Department of Education. It's going to be a Saturday grab bag, a tradition like no other. If you haven't already, guys, make sure that you give us a nice thumbs up and follow the program here on rumble.com/amradpod. If you listen to us on Spotify and iHeart and iTunes, be sure to subscribe so that you can get the show updates as they come in on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern Time. If you're tracking with us on @XAmericaNews, welcome aboard, and the YouTube channel, trying to expand, get to as many people as possible to radicalize them all. So we got a full grab bag today. Before we get to that, though, let's thank the underwriting sponsor for today's show, and that is Jase Medical. Go to jase.com, JASE.com. This is a really interesting company. We're glad to be there. They are an affiliate for us on the American Radicals Podcast. Our promo code is AMRAD, AMRAD. Shouldn't surprise you there. Get a little discount. And we had some friends in the Friend household who were doing some traveling. They went on a cruise up to Alaska to go see the whales. They'd planned this trip for so long. And wouldn't you know, they got on board the ship and a couple of them got sick. The entire vacation was ruined because they just didn't have the medicine that they could have had with them, which is what Jase gives you, JASE.com, promo code AMRAD. You got some antibiotics, some antivirals. You can even get stuff for your kids. It's just good to be prepared, especially because there might be thermonuclear war and supply chains might be disrupted, which we'll get to with George Hill right now. George, how you doing? Thanks for jumping in a pinch. Garrett was unavailable, but I've been putting this off for a little while. I know you're the expert on Russia, Ukraine. You're going to make my mom, Sue Friend, very scared today, and I'm excited for it.
Well, certainly not intended. I don't want to scare Mrs. Friend, but we're just going to go through the facts as they come forth.
I've got like 5 or 6 different articles all sort of pulled up, but just kind of give like the 30,000 foot view because it's relatively recent, but it hasn't happened within the last 24 hours. So people tend to forget. So the first one I got over at the Independent, and the initiation of this story: dozens of Russian warplanes were destroyed in a Ukrainian drone attack. It wound up being something like 3 dozen, maybe like 40, 41 of these drones. And the operation was called Spiderweb, which is pretty cool. And you brought this to my attention originally one day a few weeks ago, and you've been tracking on it. What are the basic components of this storyline?
41 Russian aircraft taken out by more than 41 drones. They used a pretty sophisticated image recognition, and it's not clear yet. And we may not ever know whether these UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, sometimes referred to as POV, point of view, they're rather small quadcopters. We don't know yet if they were fly-by-wire, in other words, had the glass wire that's used to guide them, so that in order to thwart electro warfare capabilities, or they were programmed using some form of AI, which is really terrifying. Um, but they were able to plan this for over a year, shipping those UAVs into Russia. And if you've ever been to Russia, you know that like those tractor trailers are moving around all the time, maybe more so than this country, mostly because of the way the road systems and railways are laid out. And if you're a over the road trucker in Russia, you don't ask a lot of questions because there's a lot of shenanigans and crime bosses and oligarchs that move stuff around, and ignorance is the best place to be if you're an over the road trucker in Russia. So the Ukrainians took advantage of that and were able to eliminate almost half of one third, so one sixth of Russia's nuclear triad. The nuclear triad is um, bombers, which can be recalled, which is what we saw get blown up, intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are your land based missile systems, and then your submarine launched ballistic missiles, which really for Russia are a joke. The US Navy likes to joke around that they're just targets, noisy targets, and they are. So we significantly degrade, well, little slip there because I know Vlad kind of blames us for it, but we took out a significant portion of Russia's nuclear triad a couple weeks ago.
So the report I originally saw that Zelensky took credit for was like 117 drones were able to bring this about, and I guess the planning for it was 18 months long that it's gone on, which means that it would have spanned two presidencies for the United States standpoint. And you had the Freudian slip about we were able to achieve this. Do you think that Zelensky wearing his olive green drabs fleece was in the back rooms with his Ukrainian generals and they planned this entire thing out, or was the United States likely involved in executing this?
I have nothing I can base this on that the US was involved other than looking at Ukrainian capabilities and our capabilities. That would require a great deal of not commercial satellite imagery. So you would be relying on military satellites. Um, that was quite an effort. And I'm a subscriber to Vet TV, and they did a good embed series in these Ukrainian shops that are building these UAVs. So the Ukrainians certainly have the ability, and they've demonstrated that to produce these in mass. So they definitely were involved in it. But as far as the planning and the imagery involved, I don't think they have the capabilities to pull that off. If they do, they've kept it well hidden. I'm surprised they're able to keep a secret for as long as they did in order to launch it. To move that much material into a country like Russia is just amazing, and because all it would have taken is just one shipment to get intercepted by Russian security forces.
The reporting I saw said it was housed next to a Russian FSB office
They're
complex.
planning, yeah, their operations center was housed right next to an FSB office. That's what the Ukrainians said.
Yeah, I mean,
It doesn't
I'm
surprise me. I mean, we're talking about Slavic peoples here, so we're talking like the languages are similar, the facial features are similar. If you've got some cool operators, sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight.
my holdup is I don't know if this is more like a op from a PR standpoint. Like maybe Zelensky is saying like this is going to be a way to flip the bird over to them because we were able to do this to you. Now we're just going to rub salt in that wound and say we were next to your FSB, which is essentially their secret police. It's their FBI force. Or is there really actually a myth of competence, which we've talked about with our Secret Service, our FBI, which we'll get to some of that in a little bit. But maybe they're not as robust and competent as is advertised that we see our FBI on TV and they're chasing the bad guys. And the special agent in charge broke this big case because Hollywood doesn't know that the special agent in charge doesn't actually investigate cases, but it seems like they're way more competent as they're portrayed. Maybe the same sort of myth of competence exists with the FSB because the Russians are portrayed as being like diabolical evil geniuses in all of our media as well. They all sound like Dracula mixed with Yoda, and they're all geniuses, right? That's what we sort of expect. But at the end of the day, they're government employees doing government jobs.
Yeah, they're Russians. I mean, their drinking habits and other proclivities are well known. And they're not the NKVD of old under Joseph Stalin. They're certainly not the KGB. Um, this took place over a period of, they said 18 months, but that material had to be moving across the border in pieces for at least a year, and they missed all of it. And I'm surprised Vlad is not actually doing his impersonation of Mussolini hanging from a lamppost in Corky Park right now.
Hmm. That's actually a nice little way to transition to another piece with this, because Vlad is claiming revenge. Vlad being Vladimir Putin. He says he's going to seek revenge for the Ukraine drone attack, and he warns Trump. But because it's the BBC, they had to put a picture of Donald Trump there because, I don't know, he's orange and mean and literally Hitler. So this report from the BBC, speaking after a phone call with the Russian president, the U.S. president said, quote, President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields, unquote. Donald Trump appeared to set a 2-week deadline for Vladimir Putin, which was about 2 weeks ago from this report from BBC, threatening to change how the United States is responding to Russia if he believed that Putin was still tapping him along on peace efforts in Ukraine. In the Putin call with Trump, the two leaders also discussed Iran, which I know you also know quite a bit about. Trump said that he believed that the two were in agreement that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. But for purposes of our discussion here, how is Vladimir Putin likely, in your opinion, to respond to Vladimir Zelensky short of tactical nukes falling on Kyiv?
Well, I had assessed earlier on that he would not do the tit for tat, like not just send over more drones. Haha, you send over 200, I'll send over 300. But that's what he's been doing. I still think that he's going to shoot for a decapitation strike. In other words, sending out uh, some Spetsnaz or some other, more than it would probably have to be Spetsnaz. It would have to be some group of individuals that are highly skilled, highly trained, recognizing that it's a suicide mission. Can I say that word on YouTube? Um, that it's that there's a good chance that they may not come back, but they'll be heroes of Russia, and their families will be taken care of. If he's just going to do this back and forth, um, I it's just a waste of time. It's a waste of time, money, blood on both sides, treasure on both sides. He meaning Putin, is relying almost exclusively on Iran to provide him with the Shahed drones, which if people know what that means, it means martyr. So, I, if he's in danger of losing his grip on Russia, I'm really surprised that he's cleaned house pretty well. He's truly the one uh, HMFIC of Russia. Um, my guess is, and that's all it is, because obviously I don't have any sources inside of Vladimir Putin's inner sanctum, but that he's going to have to one up him because he's already said we can't negotiate with Zelensky. We can't negotiate with this illegal Ukrainian government. So if that's the case, you would have to either try to provoke some sort of internal coup that would take down Zelensky, or you'd have to go in and do it yourself. But that's the line that Vladimir Putin has drawn in the sand, and he hasn't backed off of it.
When you're saying illegal Ukrainian government, you're using Putin's words, right? That then this goes
No,
back to
well,
his
no, I mean
installation.
he's extra constitutional. They haven't had an election.
Mhm.
They're outside the boundaries of their own constitution. So yeah, I did use Putin's words, but I mean, I think they're accurate. That's why I chose to use them.
And a decapitation operation. So basically, eliminate Zelensky, and then in the hope that, or I'm sure the effort would have a puppet or somebody that was more sympathetic to Russia in mind as being the next man up for Ukrainian government, so that they would be a lot more uh, eager to have a negotiation with Russia to bring about a ceasefire. That's what a decapitation does. I mean, how does that look so that the world doesn't respond and say, look, there's all these time. This is why Zelensky's been running around wearing his green pajamas the entire time, because he's been under threat, even though he's going to the Emmys and making appearances with world leaders and celebrities at all times. Wouldn't that, if it's done ham-handedly, like the FSB apparently handles things, bring in and incentivize NATO and the United States and everybody to get involved in a more kinetic fashion? How would Putin or people that he taps do this so that he could avoid, or at least have plausible deniability of having been involved?
He could try to make it look like an internal coup, but at the end of the day, Putin is Honey Badger, and Honey Badger don't care. There is no NATO without the United States. You know, Germany couldn't take over Luxembourg right now. The French, they're going to have to go through Germany in order to go engage, in Ukraine. So he doesn't care. I think they'll try to make it look like a coup. That it was, that there was a bunch of Ukrainian patriots that just wanted to end the war and go to the negotiating table with Russia. And here we are. Thank goodness this impediment is out of the way.
What outside of, I think, and we'll bring this next piece up here because NATO is involved in this, because they've invited Zelensky, president of Ukraine. It really stinks that they're both named Vladimir. It's kind of disruptive.
No, he's Voldemort. It's VO.
Yeah, but I'm from America. We basically pronounce it the exact same. So Big Z got invited to this NATO summit here. So we do sort of have a timeline, if, from my perspective, that they want to interrupt NATO from continuing to bring Zelensky in to the unity, to the, we're a global national initiative here, and they've invited Zelensky. They've invited him last year to this big giant summit, and I guess it's been a little bit more muted now, but the invitation is still outstanding, and that is also, you have Donald Trump at the helm here in the United States, and he's claimed that Ukraine sort of provoked this war because they wanted this NATO membership, and that's Russia propaganda really liked having that, and I guess NATO's sort of on a time crunch here as well. Now, my question to you is, in throwing this up, is NATO anxious for a war to happen? Is this a provocation in reality, or is this even something that Vladimir Putin could use for propaganda purposes and say, I'm Honey Badger and I don't care. We had to dethrone Zelensky because NATO was going to get involved and we don't want to have an Article 5 situation?
It plays right into Putin's hands.
Okay.
on a couple of fronts. Number one, it's hard coded into the Russian psyche. I think there are about 8 traditional invasion routes into Russia proper, and Ukraine sits astride of 2 of those. So, when Ukraine was pining for NATO membership, that triggered that response from Russia. They wanted a friendlier government in Ukraine, one that was more aligned with Russia, less aligned with the European Union and NATO. So now you've got NATO acting all Buffy and like, yeah, we're gonna sort this mess out. And the rebuilding plan that Germany had put forward, and some of the other smaller European countries, are looking at about a 5-year timeline. So is that their expectation, that they continue? The plan is to continue to sacrifice Ukrainians for 5 years until we, get a new version of a Leopard tank fielded. Um, it just feeds into Putin's narrative, and that Russia is under threat, and then the saber rattling coming out of the EU. And if you're going to rattle a saber, it's best to have a saber and not just a scabbard that it goes into.
The community of nations, they like to rattle the sabers, but I think you're kind of right here that they don't have they don't have the numbers, they don't have the support financially, particularly because I think Donald Trump has expressed he's loath to bring NATO or bring Ukraine into NATO, and the United States at the end of the day is kind of cutting the checks for them.
Germany essentially has deindustrialized over the last 2 years. Their embracement of green energy with the cutoff of Russian natural gas when somebody blew up Nord Stream 2, um,
You mean the
they
U.S.
pretty much
Navy vessel that was in the area doing training exercises with specific forces that are made to blow up pipelines
yeah,
under the water?
whatever, it's just so Germany's deindustrialized. So they would have to reindustrialize before they can remilitarize.
So are the other NATO members, is this just posturing for their own populations so they can sort of save face here? Or do they actually want to bring Ukraine in so that they can invoke an Article 5 in the hopes that the United States under a Donald Trump presidency is going to then send them warheads?
I think that's their expectation that somehow they can still suck the United States into this.
Oh,
And
they got Lindsey Graham on their side, so I guess
well, yeah, I mean, if you want to talk
not
about
unfounded.
if you want to talk about an empty saber, there's no better example than Lindsey Graham. Um, but I can't remember the German chancellor's name. He was just in the White House visiting with Trump just less than a week ago. Probably now
He's
almost.
less manly than Angela Merkel.
Yeah, well, that's a low bar, but um, so they want this, but they don't have any ability to do it, and I don't think they're going to trick Donald Trump into doing it for them.
Friedrich Merz, I think that's his
Yeah,
name. Yeah. All right. So, and that's foreign stuff. I want to bring it back to America because this is the American Radicals podcast. And I'm from America and I don't know the difference between Vladimir and Vladimir, whatever. There's an interesting threat here that I think I want to tie it to and take it out to Arizona, where there was a law passed bipartisan to stop the Chinese from buying land that's adjacent to United States installations. And I want to connect it to this Ukrainian drone strike on Russian military installations, because if a state like Arizona is not going to stop the Chinese from buying land that's adjacent to military installations, do you see how I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, the threat exists for China to do the exact same thing, where they could fly drones? Because there's a proof of concept that we saw 7 months ago in December when there were drones flying all over the eastern seaboard. And we didn't know, were they from hobbyists? Were they government actors? Were they artificial intelligence? Were they a hostile force? And we all just kind of sat by and just waited for answers. Might there exist a threat here for the Chinese to do the exact same thing to us and take down our nuclear triad?
and they're in a much better position to do it. Remember, it wasn't long ago they flew that balloon, and we learned that that wasn't the only balloon that they flew across the country. So they were mapping all of the electronic battle space as well as the landscape from high altitude. So a diplomatic pouch is not, as the name would imply, a pouch. It can be a shipping container. So the Chinese have had the ability to send over all sorts of material necessary to put onto the real estate that they own that's adjacent to military installations, use the imagery and the electronic battle space that they now know so much about to launch a Ukraine style attack against US aircraft. Now, our aircraft, like any other uh, first world country, they're not all in the hangars. Hangars are there for maintenance. The only time that an aircraft goes into a hangar is in severe weather and they can't fly it out ahead of the weather, or it's already in there for maintenance. So that's where, all your electronic equipment, all of your hoist and jacks and things of that nature, that's where the work is done. Now, they still do work out on the flight line, but by and large, most of your squadron aircraft are going to be parked on the flight line. So these are soft skinned targets. Most people saw the video of how easily they were taken out in Russia by the Ukrainians. and that's how our aircraft are parked, with the exception of like the B-2s, the U-2 aircraft. When it flew back in the day, the SR-71 Blackbird was housed in a hangar. Unless it's like some sort of top secret red stripe program, that wants to be away from all prying eyes, they're going to be parked out on the runway. So these are vulnerable targets, and we could lose that capability literally in a matter of minutes, because we saw the Ukrainians demonstrate how it's done. And if we had to respond to a Chinese or North Korean threat in Asia, or a uh, more expanded Russian threat in Europe, well, it'd be really hard to do without tankers, electronic warfare aircraft, and fighter jets.
Well, I'm scared now, George. Thank you. I know my mom is. Appreciate that. Let's pivot to something else. Because are you feeling vindicated? I know that I definitely feel hashtag vindicated. No, I don't. But let's bring this up, because the DIG, which is from the ODNI, the DIG, which is the Directors Initiative Group, declassified some documents that essentially proved everything that you and me and Garrett have been saying for the last 2.5 years plus about the FBI's manipulation of statistics to artificially inflate their domestic terrorism threat. The declassified special analysis report from U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies from February 2022 revealed that 61% of all the alleged DT, domestic terrorism related cases being investigated by the FBI, were related to J6. So 6 out of 10. 78%, so almost 4 in 5 of their arrests for domestic terrorism were January 6th. Now, for background, and as a refresher, because the American Radicals podcast audience has grown a little bit here, this is essentially what I became a whistleblower over, because January 6th is one case in one location, should be investigated by the Washington field office. They should send out leads if they need to go collect evidence, conduct interviews, even go arrest somebody. But instead, the decision was made, and this is where you're kind of uniquely positioned, because you were on these phone calls, George, in the very early days, in the aftermath of January 6th, where they said, look, we're going to get buy-in from the field. And instead of having one case, we're going to open up a separate case for every single person. But instead of running on a Washington field office, we're going to have them opened up around the country. So now we've turned one case into 2,500 cases. And now we have a political talking point that says that a person who went on a guided tour of the Capitol, who happens to live in Orlando, they're now a domestic terrorist for the FBI Tampa division. So the director of the FBI, the Attorney General of the United States, the President of the United States can get up and show this giant map. And it was all manipulation all along. And the reason that I don't feel hashtag vindicated is for a couple of reasons. Who has been held accountable? January 6th, J6 Jensen, Steve Jensen, he's been promoted. He's the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office. There was a request in the very early days of the Trump administration from the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi that they wanted to get the list of FBI agents and personnel who were working on the January 6th cases. Were they just doing a background check, or were they just following orders? Because that's not acceptable. Were they going gleefully after the grandmas who went on the guided tour? Because again, that's not acceptable, and that's probably arguably a conspiracy against rights, and they should be criminally charged. But Brian Driscoll, as the acting director of the FBI before Kash Patel took the helm, he said, no, I'm not giving you that list. And Brian Driscoll, was he out on his ass? No, he's been promoted. He's an assistant director in charge. So now we have no accountability for the personnel. And now we also haven't had any changes to the policy, because integrated program management, IPM, still in effect. I've been talking for a long time, George. You take it.
I sat in on those phone calls organized by Steve Jensen, and I can't remember the other gent's name. It wasn't D'Antuono, or it might have been. He might have participated, but I know Jensen was part of it. And when it was announced, when his promotion was announced, I went immediately on to X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and said, well, he drove this narrative with a twice daily phone conference call nationwide to all 56 fusion centers to thousands of people across the country, many of whom were not FBI agents. They were state police, they were governor appointees that had access to this. It wasn't a classified call. And he breathlessly explained to the entire country, from Alaska to Florida, from San Diego to Bangor, Maine, that our country was awash in white supremacists and domestic terrorists. And we saw him get promoted. We saw the Driz get promoted. Why Tulsi Gabbard would release this, I have no idea. Was it an homage to someone who pushed her to do it? Was it done with the best of intentions? I hope so. But I wrote an article for Tracy Bean's website or whatever she runs there about the narrative. Nancy Pelosi's daughter just happened to be there making a documentary for Netflix. You want to talk about the Ukraine operation. This operation was well crafted and put together, and it was too well put together to be accidental and relying solely on people to act stupid on January 6th.
And there's been no change. IPM
promotions, if you count promotions as changes.
Yeah, they all personally enrich themselves. Nobody individually has been held accountable professionally or criminally in any regard, and the policy still exists. The quota still exists, and maybe they'll go away from the agave, the anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremist, which they can say, well, that person has a perception of government overreach or negligence or illegitimacy, or not and. So we should target them for a domestic terrorism investigation. And we've been hammering the last couple of weeks on the NVE, the nihilistic violent extremists. That's the next evolution or devolution that the FBI is propping up. They're already taking credit. They had the kid out in Portland who was a they, them, because in the press release, they call him a there. And then you had the fertility clinic bombing out in California. They're both leftists, if they're anything, but that doesn't matter for now. We have the nihilistic violent extremist, which is a problem because terrorism is having an ideology historically that is inspired by a foreign terrorist organization. And your ideology drives you to take some sort of violent action in furtherance of that ideology because you're hoping that the fear will drive political change. But if you're a nihilist, you don't have an ideology. You don't believe in anything at all. But in essence, what it's really going to mean, George, and you can correct me if you disagree or if you think I'm wrong, is there's going to be a bunch of incels, a bunch of angry teenage and early 20-year-old boys online who have not had a girl willing to hold their hand. So they're spouting things. They're nihilists. And now an online covert employee or a confidential human source or a bot of an artificial intelligence from something like our Overwatch is going to say, I want to hold your hand. Let's go do a terrorism. And we'll get so many stats for the IPM now.
Look at Luigi Mangione, right? A cold-blooded killer.
Good call.
And he's got hundreds of women proposing to him, wanting to marry him. He's an inspiration to the incel community and other weak-willed individuals that, look at, have an inability to integrate with society, and they look at committing an act of violence as their introduction.
Can we pause? All right, because you and I are sort of talking. We're just going past the term incel. All right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Involuntarily celibate. It means it can't find a girl who wants to go to bed with them. And some intel analyst, probably one that you worked with, George, somebody like somebody you work with, came up with that term, which is now in vogue and is also a stat.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we used to get the guardians on those all the time, those individuals. And they were really, at the end of the day, they're not just an incel, but they're an EDP, emotionally disturbed person.
Correct.
And the FBI does not provide psychotherapy. We have a serious problem in this country with our youth. when I was growing up, believe it or not, I'm old enough to remember the President's Council on Physical Fitness.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of people that have fallen through the cracks, and that happens if you can't maintain a functional fabric of society. We've got uh, prescription drugs, off the charts, obesity. Of course, we're going to have this, but the FBI has got a construct now called integrated program management, and they'll be able to ride this wave of cash and make entire careers out of it.
Well, that's a serious discussion, George, for a serious podcast, which we do endeavor to do here. But we have lots of bread and circuses, and we have the people who were elected by you and me because we have nowhere else to go. We have to vote for the Republicans, unfortunately. They're taking up some serious matters, which involve the former director of the FBI making legitimate threats, not participating in any First Amendment protected activity on Instagram. Reporting from the Daily Signal. In exclusive, James Comey is confronted by congressional condemnation for alleged Trump threat as two Republican Senate giants join the fray. All right, I have met Mike Lee. He is not a giant. He's smaller than me. All right. And you have Josh Hawley. They're going to write a strongly worded letter. That's what we're going to get from these guys who are elected to be titans of conservatism in the Senate. This resolution urges the relevant authorities to take every relevant action to ensure that Mr. Comey is never again permitted to serve as an employee of the federal government. How is a condemnation letter, a strongly worded letter, going to stop President American Psycho Gavin Newsom from rehiring James Comey?
Comey is OBE, overtaken by events. He's an oxygen thief. The only thing that he does well now at his advanced age is convert food to feces. He's a lump of flesh. Why do we give this man, I guess we can call him that, any attention at all? He would be better off, we'd all be better off actually, by just allowing him to, bark at cars as they go by his house and maybe stare at clouds and write his thoughts, his deep thoughts about cloud formations, and just leave him alone. I mean, it's a waste of time. It's not even good theater for Lee and Hawley.
I'll tell you why. All right. And I'll go back to this piece from Daily Signal because they always go for the next thing. That's what these politicians exist to do. Get on TV, fundraise, right? This condemnation is going to also request that DOJ and Homeland Security conduct a full and comprehensive investigation of James Comey. I can't help but notice that you are a suspendable whistleblower like me. Oh, by the way, today's 999 days for me. I get my set of steak knives tomorrow, George. 999 days. Garrett's a week behind me, so he'll hit his next Sunday, 1,000 days of indefinite unpaid suspension from the FBI. I can't help but notice, though, that you came out as a whistleblower. I came out. Garrett came out. Marcus came out. During Christopher Wray. Christopher Wray was the director of the FBI. He's the FBI director who oversaw the radical traditional Catholic memo, the January 6th stuff that we just covered down on, the moms at school board meeting, the threat tag that came out with that, all of the stuff that we came out with, the Bank of America that you came out with, all Christopher Wray. And yet he's eluded the attention of these titans, these Republican stalwarts in the Senate. Mike Lee, Josh Hawley, all of them. They're all really focused down on James Comey. One, because they're never going to take any action on him because it's outside the statute of limitations. Now, I would say it's not. I would say that him running an off-the-books honeypot scheme is actually still within the statute of limitations because he promoted the women that made themselves sexually available and infiltrated the Donald Trump campaign in 2016, and they're still profiting from their promotion. So let's leave that as it is. But Christopher Wray isn't being spotlighted because the people who are in the ears of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, and then the parallel forces like the Mike Lees and the Josh Hawleys, they're all acolytes of Christopher Wray. And they don't want to highlight him because that would highlight the fact that they're really not on Team America. And Dan Bongino, when he walked into the FBI, they tapped him on the shoulder and they said, I want to show you the secret room from James Comey, not Christopher Wray. I'm going to show you what I want to show you, sir, because I did at the end of the day what Kash Patel told Maria Bartiromo. I did what the American people, damn it, want from their FBI agents. I might have concerns, but I will just follow orders, or I'll be Steve Friend out on his ass for 999 days. Take it.
Look, James Comey's not a good guy. He did some bad things, and that's in evidence. They're unassailable facts. But the laundry list of what the Emperor, Dark Lord Chris Wray did compared to his underling Darth Vader is much longer and much worse. And Comey is just a feint. He's the red laser dot for people to pay attention to. As I alluded to earlier, he's done. He's OBE. But instead, MAGA is using him to divert attention away from all the things that we just talked about the promotions, the lack of personnel changes, the lack of accountability, Christopher Wray getting off scot-free. But we're going to go after Jim Comey. Look over here, not over there. And it's for anybody willing to pay attention for more than just one news cycle, it's clearly evident.
The cat with the laser pointer is perfect. It's a perfect transition because I have another one, and we're equal opportunity critics of the communists and the conservatives and the presidents, the human Roomba and the current president, who's going to go and scratch the belly of the MAGA with this one, which I think presents a problem because it's going to empower our ex-girlfriend over at the FBI and the federal law enforcement apparatus to go after people for their First Amendment protected activity, which the caveat exists, George, that says the FBI doesn't go after people. But now they're going to want to try to put, and you can bet that the stalwarts like Mike Lee and Josh Hawley and Jim Jordan are going to be all over passing legislation that says you go to jail if you burn a flag.
But they proudly carry the flags of other countries, but they don't carry the American flag. They only burn it. Did you see a lot of the flags being burned? They weren't being burned by people from our country or from people that love our country. People that burn the American flag should go to jail for 1 year. That's what they should be doing. 1 year. And we'll see if we can get that done. We're going to try and get that done. We're working with some of your senators. I know Senator Josh Hawley is very much involved. And I know the two senators from here. I think you guys, are you guys in favor of it? Boy, would this be a bad time for them to say no. I got you. I got those two votes.
So the men and women that raised their hand and swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, which includes a First Amendment, George. Now, I mean, like, maybe I'm just talking out of my butt here. I never wore the uniform like you did. You're my favorite Marine, by the way. You've taken the place of Chesty Puller. So number one, where do you stand on First Amendment being a thing that we apparently don't have anymore? And then what's your favorite Chesty Puller story or quote?
Well, obviously, they're on our left, they're on our right, they're in front of us, they're behind us. They can't get away this time, which describes my position in Massachusetts. So that's why I'm channeling Colonel Puller. But as far as, look, the Constitution, you either for every ink dot of the Bill of Rights or you're not. And I mean that every ink dot, not if it's convenient, if it's too hard, then no, not maybe. As much as I find burning the flag reprehensible, it's a constitutionally protected right. The Supreme Court has been quite clear on that. And again, like you said just a few seconds ago, it is the laser dot for the cat to follow around rather than do the hard thing. So if you have someone waving the flag of a foreign country, a hostile country, which Mexico is, they're not a friend of me. They're a hostile country that we have to trade with. We've already seen what Claudia Sheinbaum has said um, about the United States and reclaiming California. You know what? What is the difference between, 100 guys coming across the border waving a Mexican flag and 100 people waving Mexican flags in Los Angeles? It's an invading army. Start drilling those guys. And I do mean drilling them. They're invaders. Go after them, take them out, and then go after the traitors, mainly the elected representatives that allowed this to happen. First the traitors, really, the elected representatives, and then the traitors.
It just is an
Or
unnecessary
leaders.
fight. This is like stepping on a rake because they're going to try to do something like that, as opposed to taking up like real concerns, like you're talking about, the real invaders that you could use the military, the guys that are pumping their fists, about a flag burning law when they could
There's
be.
historical precedence here. Okay, there are people that are wearing, or actually corpses that have been decorated with medals of honor. Men who have picked up the flag in battle, and carried it forward. The flag is a representation of your unit. If it's a unit flag, and a representation of your country. If you've got people coming into this country waving a foreign flag, they are an enemy against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Foreign, the person waving the foreign flag, that's my enemy. The domestic enemy is the person who gave them succor, who gave them my tax dollars to feed and house them. Foreign and domestic.
I like the Jesse Polar quote that you used, but my close second is when he was shown the flamethrower for the first time, and he said, "Where do you put the bayonet?" All right. And all right, on the subject of the DoD and some serious issues, there's a Wall Street Journal piece about the Pentagon and Area 51 has recovered down on a Saturday grab bag. I'm reaching in here for this one, and this one's wild. This one eluded your attention too, George, because I threw it at you before we went here. The Pentagon disinformation that fueled America's UFO mythology. This is wild. All right. Congressionally ordered probe took investigators back into the 1980s when an Air Force colonel visited a bar near Area 51, a top secret site in the Nevada desert. He gave the owner of the bar photos of what might be flying saucers. The photos went up on the wall, and into the local lore went the idea of the U.S. military was secretly testing recovered alien technology. But the colonel was on a mission of disinformation. The photos were doctored. The now retired officer confessed to the Pentagon investigators in 2023. The whole exercise was a ruse to protect what was really going on at Area 51. The Air Force was using the site to develop top secret stealth fighters. I don't believe it, Garrett, George. No, I think that this report is the disinformation. I think the Grays and the Blues, they were really going to war out there.
Did I suddenly fall into the Sean Ryan show?
But
Yeah.
I mean, like, no, seriously, when this sort of revelation comes out, let's just take it on its face. Let's say that this is accurate. All that you have proven is that you lied. So why would I accept your lying liars lie now? This is the problem when you lose all credibility. This is the problem when the FBI says, we're based now. America's so back, baby.
This is why Trust Me Bro doesn't resonate with people. I've been watching the confidence index of Americans now for probably about not too long after 9/11. And I watched it steadily drop with the invasion of Iraq. And it's really hard to have a functioning society when nobody believes in the tenets and the foundations that support society. And that's a real problem, especially in light of what we see going on right now with the ICE riots. And we're not talking about a Philadelphia Eagles game and people throwing snowballs at Santa Claus. We're talking about, the riots that are going on, I think now in like 36 cities. But yeah, when nobody believes in anything anymore, it's not a good place for a functioning society.
I mean, I'll even take it back to this piece. I mean, there's a pretty good remark here. The Pentagon itself sometimes deliberately fanned the flames in what amounted to the U.S. government targeting its own citizens with disinformation. they'll
You,
target you with.
you know who had that MOS in the military that did that sort of thing?
Hmm.
Military Occupational Specialty, MOS. You know who had that?
If you say Jesse Puller, I'm going to be broken.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh. So that brings up an interesting point. Do you think the revelation that she gave us that vindicates the suspendables on this J6 statistical manipulation? Do you think that that's part of an op? Is that really a laser pointer? It's taken you and me, and we're focusing on that, and maybe something else is happening right now, or is this actually like a good faith effort to maybe try to buy back a little bit of credibility with some transparency? Because once you lie, it's that boy who cried wolf. I tell my kids this all the time. I got 2 rules in this house. Don't lie to me. Don't disrespect your mom. Okay.
Yeah, I know vindication's on the way. Hang on, let me see if Sean Hannity's called me yet. No, I don't. No.
He's got Nikki Parker booked. FBI Barbie is booked solid.
Honestly, Steve, other than the suspendables and a few other, close friends here, I don't trust anything or anyone until I can multi-source it. I spent a lot of time overseas by myself, not accompanied by other guys with guns. And DTA, don't trust anyone, is a good way to stay alive.
All right. Well, I want to take it. So we got 2 more stories, and let's talk about the sun monster, the climate pagans. They worship Gaia, right? And as we have the Mike Lees and the Josh Hawleys of the world that are really focused down on James Comey, and maybe somebody burns a flag. I would like to see not even new laws passed. How about just enforcement of laws that we have and corruption that is clear and evident we actually have? And this is from plugpower.com. This is actually from the company's own website. There were some news reports about it, but I went straight to the source. The company received a $1.66 billion conditional commitment loan guarantee from the Department of Energy for a green hydrogen development pipeline. Well, that sounds great that we should be fronting the bill for $1 2/3 billion for them to go after because of the sun monster. But it's, as always, with everything that goes on with government, the rich get richer. They line their own pockets because this is all a boondoggle to begin with. So Biden Energy loan czar, whose name is Jigar Shah, signed off on this $1.6 billion loan funded by the taxpayers last year. It now appears to have directly benefited his current business partner, Jonathan Silver. Plug Power submitted the first part of its loan application with the Department of Energy before Shah joined the loan office, but was invited to submit the second part of its application in April 2021, and a month after Shah got there. So he said, hey, let's make sure you dot the I's, cross the T's, send it, and I'll push it on through. And they closed on this loan because it is typical government, George. It took them 4 years plus to actually give them the loan, but they closed on it January 16th, 2025, 4 days before the end of the Biden administration. They tried to shovel out as much money as they could to their buddies, who then just kicked it back to them because they're business partners. Who's going to jail?
Nobody from Solyndra. Oh, I'm sorry. We're not talking about Solyndra right now.
Deep pull. It's the same story over and over and over again. That's what these communists do. Of course, the communists do it, but it's just what the people do who suck on the teat of the government. $1.6 billion.
Yeah, look, it took me 6 years and a federal judge to get a VA finding on my spinal damage. And you've got veterans sleeping on the street, and we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on illegals that have come into the country. Do we need to do research on alternative energies and things of that nature? Yeah, but if there's money to be made, the private sector will fund that.
How about an X project? Hey, $100 billion if you get cold fusion down. We'll just put it out there.
Yeah.
And then invest in it as you see fit.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not giving you the money to begin with.
Yeah, put the prize out there. Look, Spain had a power collapse a couple weeks ago because of their embracement of green energy. It's clear, the evidence is clear that a green energy grid is not robust enough to handle modern technology. And as we bring AI more and more online, the demand for electricity is going through the roof. So instead of spending $1.6 billion on a new nuclear power plant, which is the cleanest form of energy that we could possibly have, and the technology has evolved tremendously over the last 30, 40 years, we're going to give it away to a bunch of people who are going to buy Lamborghinis and vacation homes uh, in the Riviera.
Yeah, I don't see Barack Obama selling his Honolulu or property. Is that he bought the Magnum PI mansion or Martha's Vineyard one too as well. So
Yeah.
I
No,
I
and
got one.
he's got the Chicago Palace and he's got the townhome in DC. But at some point you've made enough money, or so he said. I don't know where that point is for him and the other political cronies in this country, but apparently you and I aren't close to it.
No, and he didn't build the Magnum PI mansion. I know that for a fact. You didn't build that either. Um, One more, and this one is funny because we're talking about climate paganism, and we are going to talk about eating the bugs. Just this is the last story for today on the Saturday grab bag. Hold the insect burger. Eating bugs is bad for the climate, which is going to be good for us. There was a study that found that insect protein is generally worse for the environment than less non-meat protein alternatives like soy. So it's okay to be a soy boy. You don't have to eat the bugs though. Agriculture is increasingly being seen as one of the hardest industries to decarbonize, which means they want to get rid of carbon, which is good for the trees, and all people are made out of carbon. So they really just want to get rid of billions of people. It's responsible for, so agriculture is responsible for 14% of global emissions. One ways to lessen that is to replace more carbon intensive forms of protein in the food supply of both humans and animals. They basically want to make the animals eat feed that is made out of bugs because they can't get us to eat the yucky bugs, George. So they'll get the animals to eat it and they figure, all right, we'll do that. The problem is though, it costs a lot more money to grow the bugs because they're doing it in areas that are cold climates. That means they have to heat the area. And at the end of it, they're also, they could just feed the animals like regular stuff and it's less carbon intensive. But, never let a crisis go to waste. I'm sure there's lots of bugs that are companies that are collecting billions of dollars in loans from governments so that they can feed the bugs to the animals. The only good takeaway is that for at least now, I don't have to eat a mealworm cheeseburger.
These same people that push this, so babies have been replaced by dogs, right? I mean, it's
Oh yeah.
I see
Oh,
more people walking,
all
young people walking
right,
dogs
all
on
right. We
Wall
need to
Street.
do this for a second. Does anything get you more homicidal with rage than going to a grocery store and seeing a person pushing their dog in a baby carriage?
Yeah, it's up there. It's up there. So these same people would not feed their dog insect-based meals. I guarantee it.
This is a
But they
good point.
want us to eat it.
Now, I will say this as a former uniformed police officer, what always blew my mind. True story, George. I would handle calls for complaint, like you have a baby locked in a vehicle, right? Something like that. Person would report, I think there's a baby locked in this vehicle. They would not stay unseen. They would leave. But if there was a dog locked in that vehicle, they'd be there. They'd want to confront the person. They would get a crowd together, like Seinfeld style, when they parked in the handicapped parking spot and they just destroyed George's dad's car. They would be more animated about the dog being locked in the vehicle. And I'm not encouraging people to lock dogs in vehicles. Maybe you should, because I don't like dogs. But the dog was a higher priority for them.
There was a woman and her 2 children were killed by a mountain lion in California. It's a long time ago. It's like 20 years ago, but the story stuck with me. And this is like in the early days of GoFundMe, and they raised a little bit of money for the father, and I think there was a third child that wasn't killed, and they raised 10 times that much for because it was determined that the mountain lion had kittens and or cubs, whatever you call them. But they raised an exponentially greater amount of money for the kittens. So this is evil, and it's not just misplaced priorities.
There's always that question that put the people, if you see your dog drowning in a pool or a stranger drowning in the pool, what do you do? And more people actually say they would go save their dog.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Kyle Seraphin answer is you just man up and save them both. But I mean, that's not the point of the mental exercise, right?
No.
All right. So I'm done with stories on the Saturday grab bag, George. Appreciate you jumping in with me. I do have a palate cleanse. I will not try to give a biblical worldview because I can't fill those shoes. Garrett's just too big today. But I do have a fun one, and I always make fun of him. But now the last couple of times I've been making fun of me a little bit. I'm going to make fun of my home of origin right now, the great state of Florida, because it is super dangerous.
Like the first time I ever performed in Atlanta, a friend of mine pulled me aside. He was like, yo, Atlanta, be careful. It's dangerous. You could get shot. And I was like, do you know where I live now? I live in Orlando, Florida. I am an hour from the shark bite, the lightning strike, and the meth capitals of the world. 2 hours south, someone got high on bath salts and ate a face. 30 minutes north of my house right now, there's a lake filled with over 10,000 alligators. And sometimes during hurricane season, those alligators get lifted from the lake and launched into neighboring backyards, Sharknado style. Do you think I'm scared of your bullets?
Come on, George. Where can I get you down here to Florida full time?
I've got to plan a dive trip. It just has to happen. I know I'm coming down in October, late October, to be diving out of Palm Beach. So got to hit the Gulf Stream.
Just avoid the 10,000 alligators when you do. All right. That's going to do it for us today on the American Radicals podcast, guys. Thank you, as always, for joining us on rumble.com/amradpod. Hope you all have a great weekend. And until Tuesday, have a great time.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.
Everybody out in the world.